You're proposing that we go backwards in time, find humpback whales, then bring them forward in time, drop them off, and hope to hell they tell this probe what to go do with itself.
That's the general idea.
Well, that's crazy.
You got a better idea? Now's the time.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where each week we enter the world of a great film. We explore its themes, the history, the filmmaking, and the influence it has on us today. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Rocha. I'm a writer, producer, and host in San Diego, California, and very excited that we are going back in time in a meta way to talk about this Star Trek film that we've been waiting to talk about for quite a long time, Steve.
Well, and since it is a Star Trek film, I mean, this is, John, an episode of the Cine-Files, a podcast I'm very proud of, something we've worked together on for a long time. But there's this other podcast that I'm equally proud of, and that, of course, is Enterprise Incidents with Scott and Steve. And in some weird, as you say, meta way, this isn't just a Cine-Files episode, because we are welcoming, once again, one of our greatest guests, the great, incredible Scott Mantz. Welcome back to the Cine-Files.
I am so excited to be here. Johnny, my friend Johnny, my friend Steve Morris. I have been waiting every day. I look at my phone and see, are they going to email me? Are they going to text me? Are they going to call me to do Star Trek 4 for the Cine-Files? They're going to email me. Finally, I got this great email. The time has come to go back in time to talk about the most successful of the Star Trek movies up until 2009, which is Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. We are going to have a great conversation because I know we're all going to have a whole lot to say about this incredible movie by any measure.
Absolutely. And of course, we couldn't say any of those things if the Cine-Files wasn't supported by incredible people on patreon.com/the Cine-Files, as well as Apple Podcasts, where they can listen to our Cine-Files shorts. We just released one on sort of the toxic nature of social media and how that affects directors and filmmakers in our world. That's out exclusively on Apple Podcasts and on Patreon. You can also get ad-free versions of the show, as well as join our Cine-Files advisory board. It is a great, great place to support the Cine-Files.
Yeah, absolutely. Another way you can support us here on the show too, because I know a lot of people can't always support financially every month, and we understand it's tough times right now going on in the economy. But there are all these things going on with sponsors and supporters of the show. When you hear them during the commercial breaks, if things appeal to you and you want to try them out, like right now, Awaken 180 is a thing we're pushing really big because I've lost almost 40 pounds on Awaken 180 over the last 3.5 months. That's one of those people that really sponsor us and support us and love our show. And if stuff you want to try out, that's a way that makes sense for your budget to try it out and also support the show. So you're killing two birds with one stone. So we'd appreciate you all using our code and getting a huge discounts off those things that are that they're pitching and they're supporting here on the show in our commercial break. So thanks so much.
And of course, since we are talking about a Star Trek movie, I got to give a big shout out, first of all, to Johnny Rocha. When he first said years and years ago, it might have been 10 years already, you got to join us on the Cine-Files. It's a show I'm doing with this guy, Steve Morris. And the movie we talked about was Blade Runner. And that, or was it The Wrath of Khan?
No, Wrath of Khan is first.
Yeah.
We did Wrath of Khan first.
Was first. But that was like such a game changer for me when it came to bringing all of my passion and all of my knowledge about Star Trek to the fore, which we definitely did. And I got to thank John again, because doing Enterprise Incidents with Steve Morris, talking about every single episode of the original series and every single episode of the animated series as an overreaching arc is one of the most rewarding moments of my life as a professional and certainly as a lifelong Star Trek fan. And since we are going to be talking about Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, when you are done with this podcast episode or the next two podcast episodes of the Cine-Files, please head over and check out every episode of Enterprise Incidents with Scott and Steve. And I'm still getting people who are discovering this incredible podcast, and it makes me so happy when people discover Enterprise Incidents and say, I just caught up and I'm up to the Squire of Gothos. The show is amazing. So thank you all for that.
Thank you. I mean, honestly, you coming on the show to do Wrath of Khan is a seminal moment for the Cine-Files. I mean, it helped our audience grow. It was a big deal. And I just want to point out the completely meandering path we have taken to get to this point, which was way back in 2017. We have you on for the first Star Trek film we did, which is the second Star Trek film, Wrath of Khan. Then we go back to do motion picture. Then you and I decide to go back even further to the original pilot, The Cage of the original series. Then we come forward through the original series from the 60s into the animated series in the 70s, at which point we do not the third movie, but the sixth movie. Then you and I finish our run on the animated series. Then we go back to the third movie, and now we are doing the fourth movie. So we went from movie number 2 to movie number 1, back to the original series, the animated series, then to 6, then to 3, now to 4.
Because why
sense.
not? Why not?
Yeah, I know.
And now I'm going to ask.
And it must drive Steve crazy because Steve, who made it clear to me this week that it's about everything in order.
I like to put things in order
to jump around. So I know we appreciate Steve being a little malleable to allow us to get the things in the order that we can get the things depending on timing and stuff.
So when I find a new podcast I like for instance, my new one is now The Rest is History, which is a fantastic history podcast. I feel the need to go back to the very beginning of the podcast and listen to it from number 1, and it has 500 episodes. Because yes, I like things to go in order. That's how my brain works.
Yes.
But we've come up to the most important question that we always start these conversations with. Scott Mantz, how did you first come to Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home?
Well, I saw it, of course. I have made it a ritual in my lifetime to see these Star Trek movies on opening day. The only one I did not see on opening day was the motion picture. It came out December 7th. I actually saw it on December 8th at the Leo Mall in Philadelphia.
It's very disappointed in you.
Slacker. Total slacker. But I did see Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, when it came out on November 26, 1986, which made it technically, if you want to throw it back to Enterprise Incidents a little bit there, Steve, the 105th episode, quote unquote, air, quote unquote. But what was special about The Voyage Home, fellas, is that this was the first time I ever saw a movie twice in one day.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Because when it was over, I like loved the film. Of course I loved the film, but I wanted to see it again right away. So this was at the New Orleans 8 movie theater in Northeast Philly on Bustleton Avenue in Cottman. And I went into the bathroom, went into a stall, hung out for a little bit, stayed there until I heard people coming in for the next showing. And I went back and I went in and I saw it a second time. And my girlfriend at the time, Jill, she's like, I like the film. I'm not watching it again. I'm like, okay. See you later. Bye. Because I have my priorities, fellas.
Your true love was very clear. Very clear what your true love was here.
Scott, what about you guys?
John, how about you?
Oh, I totally remember seeing it in the theater. I don't think I saw it with my dad, who I used to drag to all of these things because I didn't always go with friends at the time. But I do think that this is one of those ones that I went to see with my still best friends, Jim and Maurice, from back in high school, and just enjoyed it because we were Star Trek fans. We enjoyed the Star Trek movies and the Star Wars movies, so we always went together once I got to high school. So I do remember seeing this in the theater and just being so enchanted by the movie. That's the one word I would use, is enchanted. And I have to say, there are not that many Star Trek episodes or films that I would necessarily say are enchanting. This film was enchanting. When they go back in time, the jokes, it showed so many different levels of these characters that we hadn't quite seen in the TV show or in the other movies in this way. And I thought it was really great that after 4 movies and 3 seasons of the TV show, we got to see them as like their regular selves in a situation like this in the 1980s. So for me, I always loved this movie for that. And I remember and watching it again for our show twice, by the way, Scott, speaking of seeing it twice, I watched it back to back the other day just because I had time and I was in the mood and really enjoyed it the first time. And it had been a while. And I felt that same way all over again, how much I appreciate this movie for the uniqueness that it is in the original cast set of movies, you know.
You know, it's funny, Johnny. I have so many words in my 11 pages of notes, which, God, that felt so good to take 11 pages of notes. I got to tell you.
Sure.
So many words to describe the voyage home. Enchanting is not a word that I used, but man, oh man, brother, you are right on. If there is one word to describe the overall feeling, the impact of this movie, whether you're seeing it in 1986 or 2025, enchanting is the word. So bravo on that, my friend.
Thank you, brother.
I couldn't agree more. It is enchanting. I saw it. I think I saw every Star Trek movie on opening day, including the motion picture, until the mid to late 90s. And that's when I was in film school, and then it kind of went by the wayside. So yes, I definitely saw this on opening day in Marin County. And it's just one of those movies that it was like, oh, you want to put on Star Trek 4 again? Yeah, sure. And you just watch it. I watched it all the time because it is, John, as you said, enchanting. So this is technically an episode of the Cine-Files, but in a weird way, it's also continuing the legacy of Enterprise incidents. And so would you two like to know a little bit about what was going on in the world right before this movie came out? Not something we normally do.
Oh my
on the
gosh,
Cine-Files.
it feels so good. I needed this. Let's hear it, Steve Morris.
Did you get this from the computer on Vulcan? Where did you get this information from? I want to know where you got this information.
I definitely went to a computer on Vulcan. That's where all the good information is. So the film came out on November 26, 1986. It's so weird when history sort of echoes. And Scott and I experienced this a ton when we were doing Enterprise incidents, and there would be stories that seemed like they were just connected to the headlines today. Yeah. Well, on November 6, Ronald Reagan signs a landmark immigration reform bill. It's mostly about amnesty for the undocumented immigrants that are in this country and enforcement of penalties against employers who hire undocumented workers.
Wow.
And Reagan said, "We lead the world because, unique among nations, we draw our people our strength from every country and every corner of the world. I believe in the idea of amnesty for those who have put down roots and lived here, even though some time back they may have entered illegally." That's Ronald Reagan, 1986.
Damn. Unbelievable.
Yeah. So, John, you all right?
Yeah. Just seeing the stuff this morning from Dodger Stadium and seeing what's happening. Yeah. These are my people. It's devastating, man. So when you read that, and you can cut this out, Steve, but when you read that, it just breaks my heart how far we've fallen. Even from someone I did not appreciate or respect as a president, even he knew what was the right, humane thing to do for this country. And to see what's happening now, it's just very, very hard for me. So when you read that, I'm sorry. I'm in the emotion of it all. So but please,
Johnny, every day, seems like on every hour, there's something to make me feel like you just did.
Yeah.
When you needed a second. I think it's one of the reasons why I just felt such a relief to dive into this movie, which is enchanting, like you said, and couldn't wait to talk to you about it.
Well, I mean, what's interesting to me about this is a movie that's about something. I mean, that's the thing about Star Trek, is that Star Trek is not shying away from looking at issues. And sometimes it does it in a light, fun way like this film. But that's part of what the joy of it is. And it's so crazy. Again, like I said, there's weird echoes going on because right after this announcement of this immigration bill, we start to hear news about this thing called the Iran-Contra affair.
Oh, yeah.
On November 10th, Ollie North and Fawn Hall start shredding those documents. On November 13th, Reagan admits that they sold weapons to Iran, which, again, history is really echoing right now. On November 15th, the Beastie Boys released their debut album. It's the first album to hit #1 on the Billboard charts. The WHO announces the first global effort to fight AIDS on November 20th. On November 22nd, Mike Tyson becomes the youngest heavyweight champion in history by defeating Trevor Berbick. He was 20 years old.
Yeah.
Damn.
And these two songs that were at the top of the charts at the time were You Give Love a Bad Name and Take My Breath Away. Those are the two
Movie in
big
Berlin,
songs.
right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Berlin, because Top Gun,
Yep.
which came out on May 16th, 1986, that was the highest grossing movie of 1986.
Wow.
Beating Star Trek for The Voyage Home. But man, oh man, I got to say, for that movie came out in May, and by November, for Take My Breath Away to still be in the charts, that's pretty impressive. But that is an amazing song. It holds up.
So, Scott, can you tell us a little bit about how this crazy movie came about?
I would love to tell you how this incredible movie came about. So, Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home is the second film directed by Leonard Nimoy. Of course, the first is Star Trek III: The Search for Spock. Now, when he came to direct Star Trek III, he kind of did it with what you would call training wheels. He was heavily supervised by Paramount, which was obviously the production company, the studio behind the film. But because of the success of that film, he had more reign, more control, and definitely more confidence when it came to his approach for Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. The screenplay is credited to Harve Bennett, Nicholas Meyer, of course, who directed Star Trek II, and wrote it, even though he didn't get a credit for it, Steve Morris and Peter Kreitz, from a story by Leonard Nimoy and Harve Bennett. Now, I never knew this, but when you're watching the film, all the stuff that takes place in the 23rd century, which is the beginning part and the end part of that film, was written by Harve Bennett. All the stuff in the middle, the stuff that takes place in 1986 in San Francisco, that's the stuff that was written by Nicholas Meyer. So the dialogue and the tone of the film, it's amazing how, the first part of the movie feels very much like a Star Trek film, but the dramatic shift in tone, which is something that I never really appreciated until this rewatch for the Cine-Files, made me think back to the shift in tones from when Superman goes from, Smallville to Metropolis. It's an incredible shift in tone that works. William Shatner got $2 million to play Admiral James T. Kirk on Star Trek IV. And the reason I bring that up, Steve and Johnny, he got $2 million for Star Trek IV. That is 5 times his total salary for all 3 seasons of the original series.
That is amazing.
And you know what? If you tell Shatner that, he would both laugh and probably be pissed. The budget for this movie was about $25 million. That's compared to $12 million for Star Trek II.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
The Star Trek II was the lowest budgeted of the Star Trek movies because it was produced by the TV division. And so was Star Trek III, which was budgeted at $16 million. You went from $12 million to 16 to 25. So clearly Paramount is feeling very, very confident about Star Trek IV. The domestic box office for Star Trek IV is $109.7 million. That made it, without question, the highest grossing of all of the Star Trek films, including the Next Generation movies, up until Star Trek 2009, directed by J.J. Abrams, which made about $259 million domestic. So the domestic box office of The Voyage Home, 109.7. That is a very, very big increase over Star Trek II, which is about $79.8 million. Star Trek III, which was $76.5 million. So Star Trek IV was supposed to come out, just like its 2 predecessors, in June of 1986. But William Shatner was a little busy. He was filming the 4th and final season of a TV series called T.J. Hooker.
Naturally.
You guys ever see that?
Of course. Across the hood of the car right now.
Yeah. Or hanging on the windshield. Oh, God. Gotta love William Shatner. Yeah. Well, I want to ask you guys, before we dive into the movie itself, that how do you, I know, Johnny, you talk about how enchanting the movie is, but what was it that struck you about the film while you rewatched it this time that felt new and fresh to you?
Oh, the one thing is the way they've cleaned the film up. Like, it is such a joy to see this film in 4K. Yeah, I know it's not Roger Deakins or, but there's I don't know, man. It pulls you back to being a kid again and enjoying it even more, seeing everything so clearly and beautifully and crisp. I was so impressed by that. And I'll tell you this, it was great to see Shatner. Like, this is Shatner, prime Shatner in terms of Star Trek. There's such an ease and flow to the chemistry with him and Nimoy. And also, I appreciated Nimoy's nonverbal acting in moments. There's a lot of funny moments here, especially with Bones and their back and forths. And there's some great, because you're playing again, because Nimoy's such an intense and studied actor, an experienced actor. For him, he has to find the authenticity of the reactions of a Spock who is still coming out of just being reborn, in essence, in Star Trek 3. So he's not just going to have an easy back and forth with Bones. And so his reaction to those buttons and the comedic back and forths are really great to appreciate when you're watching it as an actor. So I think those are the three things that really stood out to me seeing it again this time around.
What about you, Steve?
I'm trying to think of how to put this in the words without giving away my final thoughts.
Yeah.
Here's the thing I'll say. Something that I think we don't talk about enough. There's so much pressure on films to get it right. Everything, and there's so much with social media now and all the nerdverse. There's so much of just like people pressuring things like this has to be perfect. The thing that struck me so much watching this movie this time, these guys are having so much fun. You can just feel the fun. Is that, and this is, this is something that I heard someone say years and years ago, and I think is something we should remember, is that in the theater, there's a reason why you call it a play, is because it's play, is that we're supposed to play. And that's what this movie feels like. It has a spirit of play. Everyone, this family has come together and they're having a ball. And whether or not they're really having a ball, behind the scenes, I don't know. I'm sure there was stuff going on, but it feels like play. That's the biggest reaction that I had, I think.
Yeah.
It's a really, really great point, Steve. And John, I love watching these actors play to all of their strengths. The strengths that they are so in character and all the 23rd century stuff, but all the fish out of water stuff too is really, really fun. And the way they all branch off and splinter off into little camps. But, and this, I too want to save a lot of this for my final thoughts on it. But I gotta say, the biggest takeaway for me after watching it again for the first time in a while, and probably Steve, this is probably the first time I've seen the Star Trek 4 since we wrapped Enterprise Incidents.
Oh, wow.
And there were a few episodes, more than a few actually, where we talked about communication.
Yeah.
How communication was ultimately what saved the day. And that was evident in the finest episodes of the original series. Look at Devil in the Dark. We got to kill this thing. It's killing the miners. We need the per diem. And then, because Spock is able to communicate with the Horta, we realize it's a mother protecting its young. Then in Metamorphosis, so we got to kill the companion or whatever this thing is so we can get Commissioner Hever back to the Enterprise and cure her disease. But then, because of the translator, we hear that it's a woman in love with the man. Changes everything. And even Arena, when the Federation realized that maybe they were wrong because maybe they were intruding on the Gorn. But what is this episode about? Ultimately, it is about communication. This probe, we don't know what it is. We don't know what it wants. And when Paramount and producer Hart Bennett suggested that there are subtitles when the probe is pulsing and communicating, that Leonard Nimoy said, no, wait a minute, no. It's better that we don't know what's going on. But ultimately, this movie is about communication. We have to get humpback whales into the future so that the humpback whales are going to communicate with the probe. We don't know what it's going to say, but it doesn't matter. The communication is ultimately what saves the day. And rather than destroy it, which Kirk knows is a futile attempt. And it's this, an epiphany, gentlemen, that I never had before, but because of all the discussions that we have had, John, you joined us for like 7 episodes of Enterprise Incidents, and Steve, that opened my eyes to so many things. So I owe this new perspective of the Voyage Home to our conversations.
Wow.
Well, first of all, that's great. And second of all, I think that you put your finger on another thing about this movie is that it so perfectly continues the thematic journey that we already had in the original series. It understood, this is what's so great, particularly about, we'll call it the trilogy of like the evolution of where Star Trek comes from and where it is going. It's just so critical, I think.
And
speaking of which,
right?
And still going. Absolutely. Shall we get in the movie?
Let's get into it. Yay!
I had entirely forgotten that we start with a dedication to the crew of the Challenger on the screen. And I'm assuming this was a big event for you guys as well. We were all in high school at the time.
Yep.
Do you remember where you were when that happened?
John, do you?
Yeah, I think, yes. I guess a freshman in high school, I guess, when it happened. Yes, that's right. Yeah, Garfield. Yeah, I remember distinctly that the teachers wheeled in televisions into the classes.
Classrooms, yeah.
For us to watch this. And then when it happened, there was this gasp. There was this shock and horror. And then they were told over the intercom to wheel the TVs out because they didn't want children being exposed to seeing what had happened here. So I remember that very distinctly. And then I think we were sent home. If I remember correctly, we were sent home because it was such a horrific thing, and that it was something people had been celebrating, and then to see the explosion of the shuttle was just so devastating that they ended up canceling classes, I think, and sent us home. But yeah, I remember that distinctly. Just the wheeling in of the television. I remember that as a very strong memory, and watching with people and reacting to it. Not believing it is the number one thing that I remember. Is like, what is happening?
My vivid memory of that, I was a senior in high school, and I was in my American history class. The instructor's name was Dr. Pollock. And it's funny, I remember he was talking about Iran. And then the department head opened the door, and she was visibly upset and distraught. And I remember her exact words. She said, "Since this is an American history class, you might want to discuss the fact that the Space Shuttle Challenger just exploded."
Oh, wow. Jesus. That's a rough way to bring that in.
Oh my God, Steve. It was traumatizing. Which is why I remember the tone of her voice was she was angry and upset. And it was a traumatizing like shock. And my friend Mark Lowenstern, like, because he was a real, space guy, space nut like I was. And we both jumped out of our seats like, what? And yeah, John, we got sent home. I got home and I put on Peter Jennings. Yes. And they kept playing, the explosion over and over, and I couldn't believe it. But that's funny, Steve. I forgot myself, even after seeing this movie so many times over the years, but I guess it had been a while. So I completely forgot about that moment at the very beginning when they dedicated to the Challenger. And, I got to say, what a class act. What a class act for Star Trek, which was then celebrating its 20th anniversary of existence, to honor the crew of the Challenger. That still, to me, just goes, yep, you know what? Of course Star Trek did that.
Yeah, I mine's the same thing. I was in Chip Ray's. I'm on the West Coast, so it was the first class of the day. They wheeled the TV in. We saw the explosion, and I think we stayed at school all that day. And it was heavy. I mean, it was a really heavy. It's not at 9/11 level or anything like that, but it is definitely was for my high school years. It was a big deal, and I agree with you, Scott. I think it is such because it's not BS. That's what I like about it, is that there is a direct connection between Star Trek and NASA. There are people who went to work at NASA because they love Star Trek. You know, there's Nichelle Nichols has obviously had that connection in recruiting. I mean, like, it's a real thing. And I think with other properties, this coming up at the beginning of the movie might feel phony. I don't think it does at all. I think this feels like this is what they should be doing.
Yeah, it feels like, well, of course, you know, it was that they would do that. And, you know, this was now, you know, when the movie opened, it was 11 months later because it was January 28th. And now the movie came out on November 26th. So it's almost a year later. And, but yes, that definitely like takes you right into it, doesn't it?
And we go into the titles, and I have to say, I really do like this score from Leonard Rosenman. I think it's a different feeling from what we've had before from James Horner, but I really enjoyed the sort of upbeat, joyful quality. And I also like that it's just we're listening to music, and you're looking at big names of the actors on the screen. And my memory of being in the theater is just people just cheering the names. Because I think what's happened between the first 3 Star Trek movies leading to this is we've fallen in love with those people. And so the people that are in the theater are like, yes, let's celebrate George Takei. Let's celebrate all these people. So each name that came up was really fun. That's my memory and experience of it.
You know, when I was watching the opening credits, I remember back in the day, and certainly during the rewatch, you know, how different the score sounds compared to the James Horner scores of The Wrath of Khan and The Search for Spock. Now, when I was younger, so much younger than today, I remember not really liking the score composed by Leonard Rosenman, who was a good friend of Leonard Nimoy's, and Nimoy actually wanted Rosenman to score Star Trek 3, but Paramount said no, they wanted to use James Horner because, you know, the score for Wrath of Khan was just so great. Leonard Rosenman had done the scores for movies like 1980's, the Neil Diamond version of The Jazz Singer. Also, 2 Planet of the Apes movies, Beneath the Planet of the Apes and Battle for the Planet of the Apes. But also classic films like Fantastic Voyage and not 1, but 2 James Dean movies, Rebel Without a Cause and East of Eden.
Wow.
Nimoy wanted to bring Rosenman in because, like I said, they were friends. But also, he wanted a score that you pointed out, Steve, right away, that was more upbeat. And like you pointed out, Johnny, that was more whimsical, more playful. So, but there was still a little bit of pressure to use James Horner again. The reason that didn't happen was 2 reasons. After Aliens, which came out in, I think it was May of 1986, you know, the score for Aliens, composed by James Horner, is fantastic. Yeah. So after that, James Horner felt like Star Trek was kind of behind him. He didn't want to sort of go back to that, and which is a shame because I would love to have, you know, you talk about the Star Trek 4 as being like the 3rd part of a trilogy of films, you know, the Genesis trilogy. It would have been great to, you know, have James Horner back, but you know, I appreciate Leonard Rosenman's score more now than I did when I was younger.
All right, and now we're in the movie, and the first thing we see is this probe coming out of the distance, and we hear this odd droning noise, which we're later going to realize is critical to the whole story because it's whale sound. But I like both the design of this probe, and I love the sound design that we have going along with it.
What did the probe look like, Steve Morris, when it first appears on the screen?
It seems like it might be some kind of a doomsday machine is sort of the reaction that I have to it.
That is exactly the reaction I had to it just the other day, rewatching A Voyage Home. And it was definitely a reaction to when I first saw the movie for that first of 2 times that day on November 26, 1986. For a moment, I got like super excited and I expected to hear the dun it, dun it, dun it, dun it. But no, it is not the planet killer from the Doomsday Machine. It is a probe. What the heck is this thing? What did you think, my friend Johnny, when you saw the probe for the first time?
I remember being really rattled by the probe. Like the sounds of them of the probe is so stark. You're just like, what the hell is that? And the accompanying just rumble to it. I remember feeling like this was a level of I'm going to use this word. Some people might disagree. But I remember feeling that as a teenager. It was a level of terror that I hadn't quite seen in Star Trek to this point. And so the sound and this cylindrical thing with this, it looked like almost like an orca baby, if you remember that scene from Orca, like hanging out below. So for me, I couldn't make sense of it, but it was terrifying to me as a young teenager, seeing it in hearing it in the movie. So that was my first reaction to the probe, is that it seemed a little darker than I'd seen Star Trek go up to this point, even with Khan and whatever that we'd seen in the movies.
So we're on a Starfleet vessel, and I think this is basically a scene that we have seen in various versions in many, many Star Trek things, where it's clearly this is like the scout ship that's out a long way, and they're transmitting to Starfleet about this crazy thing that they're seeing that they can't communicate with.
It appears to be a probe, Captain. From an intelligence unknown to us.
Continue transmitting universal peace and hello in all known languages. Get me Starfleet Command.
Scott, it occurred to me for the first time ever, and again, I've watched this movie for so many decades. It occurred to me exactly what you said, Steve. We've seen this scene before. So we know how we talk about the red shirts, and that basically means you're going to die. These are the red shirt ships that we see in Star Trek. And I don't know if anybody else has ever made that observation, but it occurred to me this time around, like, these are essentially red shirt ships. They are sacrificed for the overall narrative, the overall story that we're trying to tell. And certainly the probe has quite a few red shirt ships in its wake, as we see in the opening of this movie.
That's an interesting perspective, but I think we're skipping over a very, very crucial point here with the USS Saratoga, which is obviously a refit version of the USS Reliant from the Wrath of Khan. The captain, first of all, so two things. For the first time, when you see the Saratoga sort of losing power next to the probe, you're getting scale. You're seeing how friggin' massive this probe is.
Yes.
And that this little dinky little starship has not a chance in heck of being a force of power to stop it. But the most important thing about this scene that we're seeing at the beginning of a Star Trek film that just had a very sobering message at the beginning is the captain is a woman of color.
Yes. A black female captain. Yes.
Like way before Catherine Janeway on the Voyager, you have the very first female captain of a starship ever seen in Star Trek. Now, we don't know the captain's name, but she is played by Madge Sinclair. And even though her scene only lasts a few minutes, I thought Madge Sinclair did a phenomenal job of possessing and depicting the authority that goes along with being a starship commander. Right. Madge Sinclair, this is not even her first brush with Star Trek. In season 7 of The Next Generation, she played Captain Silva LaForge, Geordi LaForge's mother in the episode Interface. Madge Sinclair is an Emmy winner. She was in Roots. Obviously, there's the connection with LeVar Burton, who played Geordi LaForge. She played Eddie Murphy's mother in Coming to America. Yes, fuck you too. And she was one of the voices in The Lion King. But, I thought I would love to have seen, more of that character on the Saratoga. But, we got what we got.
Yeah, she was the mom in Lion King. Sorabi.
Yes, that's right.
And then we're back to my hometown, San Francisco, California, and Starfleet Command, where we're in this big sort of conference and we're looking at footage of Klingons. And in this weird way, we're doing this thing, John, it's like the Rocky thing where you're ending starting the previous movie with the end of the last movie. This is similar, because now we have the Klingons who are on the bridge of the Enterprise at Star Trek 3, and we hear that countdown and relive the explosion of the Enterprise.
This is an 80s staple, and of showing that stuff before you go into it. But and it's so great that the only footage they have of events are always the movie footage we've seen from the previous movie.
It's funny that.
I always love that.
Right. It's not like the camera above the bridge. You know, you see the Klingons running around. It's basically, oh yeah, we got this footage from Paramount.
Yeah.
Exactly. I love that.
And then, and speaking of footage we've seen before, now we see Captain Kirk just starting to describe what we know as the speech on the Genesis device. And then we hear,
Behold the quintessential devil in these matters, James T. Kirk, renegade and terrorist. Not only is he responsible for the murder of a Klingon crew, the theft of the Klingon vessel, see now the real plot and intentions.
You know, the Klingon ambassador is played by John Schuck, who, interestingly, before Susan Bay was married to Leonard Nimoy, she was married to John Schuck.
What?
Which is, I know, isn't that wild? Yeah, that's very, very wild. But John Schuck's Klingon ambassador, that's a power. I mean, again, short scene, that's all he's got until the end of the film, when we see him again. But he's terrific in this moment.
His toe-to-toe that Steve's about to tell us about Mark Leonard is fantastic. And the way he's, it's funny, it's funny to watch movies now with the way things have changed in our political world and how people speak and alternative facts or narratives and all the stuff that now is a part of it, and that no opinion is 100% the fact. There's always a loud voice to counter any opinion you think is the truth. Even now, how much the flat earthers versus people who think we have a round earth, all those kinds of things. And here he is, and you can see, in the past I would just dismiss the Klingons, right? But watching it now, you kind of marvel at how well this scene is written, because you can see it from his point of view, from a Klingon point of view, how he could be righteous in this moment, how he could look at it a certain way, how he can move certain facts to fit a narrative as he's trying to push the agenda of the Klingons. And if you have a respect for the Klingons, you could say, well, I mean, if our race was possibly, or our planet or a species was possibly in danger, I would also maybe look at this narrative and try to understand what the hell is really going on here. Because when he presents the facts, you kind of see his logic. You may not agree, but you kind of see his point of view on this, which I think is really a credit to the writers.
I totally agree. I mean, to me, we just had the incredible season 2 of Andor, which has a whole sequence where we have multiple narratives about a protest that turns into a riot and what actually had happened there. And I actually think I agree with you. And particularly, again, these are the echoes, and I'm not trying to make this a political conversation about an extremely complicated issue. But if you asked, Dr. Marcus, what are you developing? She's like, well, I'm developing a thing to create life, to create great planets where people can live on. But the discussion of whether or not this could be a weapon is the Klingons are totally right. This is completely capable of being a really crazy weapon. And we are right now, as we are recording this, there is a country that for years has said they were developing energy for nuclear power because they want to power their thing. And a lot of other people are saying, yeah, but you could use that to turn it into a weapon. And we are at this moment at the start of a war in the Middle East over this issue. And so it's like the Genesis device could totally be a weapon. The Klingons aren't
even
wrong.
In Star Trek 3, remember what Krug, he referred to it as the Genesis torpedo. Yeah. Because he never saw it for a second as a scientific way to create life or to support life.
Excellent.
He saw it immediately as a weapon. So you're all making excellent points.
And the result of this awesome energy was euphemistically called the Genesis Planet, a secret base from which to launch the annihilation of the Klingon people. We demand the extradition of Kirk. We demand justice.
Great speech, very powerfully delivered.
And the way he says, we demand justice, like it's such an impassioned speech. Like, again, what a standout. He's on the screen for 3 minutes, if that. And then, Steve, there is a moment we hear a voice before we see who is actually talking. And this is a sort of a choice, directorial choice that's been used often in film and certainly used before in the original series. And it's something we've talked about here in the Cine-Files, and we talked about it on Enterprise Incidents. What is this method used?
It's called prelapping, sort of, but it basically means we hear something before we see it.
Klingon justice is a unique point of view, Mr. President.
Yeah, and then there's Sarek being an ambassador, sticking up for Spock and Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise.
So I had an epiphany in this moment, which I think this is, and it's in particular this moment right here, although we could put it a lot of different places. I think this is critical for developing fandom as it exists today, which is that, you know, a character that appeared in like one episode of Marcus Welby, MD, nobody was clamoring to bring that person back. But because of the nature of Star Trek and that there's this decade where people are just watching it over and over and over again on reruns, we got connected to these smaller characters that became really important to us, even though they're not important necessarily in the way most shows work. Like on Bonanza or Gunsmoke or Perry Mason, you didn't remember one character like we remember Sarek. So and so when he shows up on screen, we cheered. And this is the world we're in today, where little small characters or small moments, like someone's, you know, how something happens exactly in the order of the video game in The Last of Us becomes really important to people.
Oh, yeah.
Because we've gotten accustomed to it. And I think Star Trek more than anything is like what transitions us towards the world that we inhabit now.
I knew, Steve, you were going to have something to say about Sarek in this film, in this scene, because I remember when we were talking about Journey to Babel, the three of us, because Johnny, you were on that episode. Yeah, the three of us were talking about Journey to Babel, talking about how disappointed Sarek was in his son for joining Starfleet. And how he didn't really like Starfleet. But now we have him sticking up for Spock and Kirk. I mean, Spock's his son, but still, the people that he kind of looked down on and judged in Journey to Babel, now he is defending them. And it is such a great character arc for Sarek. Again, this character, he was in one episode of the original series, and he was such a beloved. First of all, it's a great episode written by the amazing DC Fontana, but the character, the great dynamic with the family, the human mother, the Vulcan father, but it's such an earned moment to cheer. The moment you're saying you're cheering for Sarek, it's earned. It's earned because of that arc.
Wow. I mean, it's kind of an amazing thing that you can have a character conflict introduced in the late 60s, then kind of resolved at the end of this film in 86, and still also continuing into Next Generation, where we see him come back like that. You know, over decades, you're evolving this character. That's kind of an amazing thing.
I also think it's amazing, Steve and Scott, that this is a franchise clearly led by one person, and that is William Shatner's character, Captain Kirk. Yet Spock is the one that gets the father-son issues, and it's usually the lead that gets the father-son issues in franchises. So that's another way that this franchise is so unique and amazing in that. And it's so well done, because how many people watch Star Trek and relate to that father-son relationship between Spock and Sarek, because Sarek is disappointed in Spock, or Spock thinks Sarek is disappointed in him. And so there's such a long journey for them to get to the beautiful scene they have at the end of this movie. You know,
excellent point, my friend.
All right, I'm sorry. I have to go on a little tangent, but the thought just occurred to me. I'm really sorry.
Bring it on, my friend.
But like so what you guys are saying is really interesting, which is like the father issues, and that Kirk doesn't have father issues. And
I didn't say he didn't have father issues.
But here's what's so interesting.
Dominant thing.
This is the thought that occurred to me, is the difference between this James T. Kirk and the Kirk we see in Star Trek 2009 is the absence of a father.
Yes, 100%.
And so this Kirk, and I just suddenly went, man, I bet Kirk had a great dad. I bet this Kirk didn't, because he doesn't have all those angers and all those issues that the Chris Pine Kirk has. And so I suddenly went, I'm suddenly fascinated by who the hell was Kirk's father, you know?
Yeah, right. Yeah, sure.
Great thing to find out.
Genesis was perfectly named. The creation of life, not death. The Klingons shed the first blood while attempting to possess its secrets.
And I love this line from our Klingon ambassador.
Vulcans are well known as the intellectual puppets of this Federation.
Oh.
Love it. That's a great line. And now we get into sort of this interrogation back and forth.
Your vessel did destroy USS Grissom. Your men did kill Kirk's son. Do you deny these events?
We deny nothing.
Again, don't want to make this political, but you could translate this specific argument into many, many conflicts that are going on today.
Sure can.
You know.
It is amazing, I gotta say, that Star Trek is able to do that, was able to do that, was able to, write for what was happening in a way that it could be relevant, 60 years later. I mean, next year is the 60th anniversary of the original series, and there's so much about that show that is relevant to what is happening right now, and especially Star Trek 4, which is a really great point that you're making, Steve.
The Council's deliberations are over.
Then Kirk goes unpunished?
Admiral Kirk has been charged with 9 violations of Starfleet regulations.
And the Klingon does not like the sound of that.
Starfleet regulations? This is outrageous. I love it.
That's great, Johnny.
I love the line. It's so great. Outrageous.
What's cool is, which I hadn't thought about, is like they don't know they're doing this, but they're setting up Star Trek 6.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. The way this conversation, the scene concludes with the ambassador saying there shall be no peace as long as Kirk lives.
Yeah.
And, 5 years later, you got Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, where, Kirk, of all people, with the way he feels about the Klingons, let them die, is, the ambassador trying to facilitate this fractured peace talks, which, but yes, I absolutely thought the same thing, that without intentionally trying to make it happen, it does set up the payoff of Star Trek 6.
I think that's one of the biggest misses of Star Trek, is that they didn't create a Klingon series where we see Star Trek through the eyes of Klingons.
That's a great idea. What a great idea, John.
That is a great idea.
Honestly, what would you feel like if Kirk, who constantly bests your Klingon ships, your Klingon crews for decades, by the way, from the TV show into the movies, that is chronological decades in Star Trek as well, in the history of, or in the chronology of Star Trek, the universe of Star Trek, you get to the point where it's Kirk of all people who is going to be the ambassador to negotiate peace. Like, how much would you really trust that? And does Chang,
Can you imagine
peak for a lot of people, Yeah.
a series showing the original series timeline from the Klingon point of view?
That's what I'm talking. That it would be fascinating to see that,
Wow. I would watch that. I would watch
100%.
that.
I'm sold. Yeah, I'm in.
Yeah, you sold me. If everyone from Paramount Skydance is listening,
Please.
here you go. Here's an idea.
Please. You don't have to pay me. Just let me sit in the writer's room. I'll just watch it.
We're back on Vulcan, and we hear our first captain's log.
Captain's log, stardate 8390. We're in the 3rd month of our Vulcan exile, and it was Dr. McCoy with a fine sense of historical irony who decided on a name for our captured Klingon vessel.
The SS Bounty from Mutiny on the Bounty. I gotta say that in our timeline between Star Trek 2 and Star Trek 4, it was 4 years. But in their timeline, it was about 4 to 6 months. And I think in the Voyage Home is like the last time the original series crew really looked great. They didn't really start to look like they were like getting up there. Certainly I think by the time Star Trek 6 did come around in 91, they did look, older, much older than they did in Star Treks 2 through 4.
By the way, this is my pitch. This is more of an HBO pitch. Is the actual story of the Bounty, which is 3 separate stories, would be an incredible limited series, because there's the mutineers who went on some island and lived for 150 years totally undetected and had wars with natives and all this thing. There were mutineers who changed their mind, who got arrested and hauled back to England in a basically a metal box on top of a ship and survived shipwrecks and all this other stuff. And then there's Bly himself, who also has a crazy adventure after the thing. The story of the Bounty is completely ridiculous in every way, just so you know.
And like those mutineers of 500 years ago, we too have a hard choice to make.
And the crew is lined up, and Kirk walks down the line as each member of the crew says, "Aye, sir."
I like that moment.
Yeah, I think we already know kind of what we're talking about.
Let the record show that the commander and the crew of the late Starship Enterprise have voted unanimously to return to Earth, to face the consequences of their actions in the rescue of their comrade, Captain Spock.
The way that the dynamic is between these actors, they've been working together by this point for 20 years.
Yeah.
Walter Koenig, 19 years, because he didn't join until season 2, but you know what I mean. But I just love seeing these people together. I really, really do. They really, the chemistry, the interplay, and that was one of the things that I took away with this latest viewing of The Voyage Home, was just that dynamic. It just felt good. It just felt good to see these people again.
I like this little moment with Scotty.
How soon can we be underway?
Oh, give me one more day, sir. Damage control is easy. Reading Klingon, that's hard.
That's hard.
And these are the jokes. You know what I mean? Like, they're just so light and good and comfortable in their world. And all these jokes make me happy.
You'd think they could at least send a ship. It's bad enough to be court-martial and spend the rest of our lives mining borite, but to have to go home in this Klingon fleet trap.
We can learn a thing or two from this fleet trap. It's got a cloaking device that costs us a lot.
Well, I just wish we could cloak the stench.
By the way, how great is D. Kelly, DeForest Kelly, in this film? Yeah. When you're like, as the film progresses, you see the back and forth between Kirk and Spock, and then you see the back and forth between Kirk and McCoy. Yeah. And then you see the back and forth between Spock and McCoy. Like, this is what makes The Voyage Home feel like the original series. This is exactly the kind of banter and the tone of the banter that felt so true to the original series.
I mean, McCoy is so essential, and especially, and I think it comes through really clearly in this movie, as you were pointing out so well, Scott, because he is, ironically, I'm going to say this, and some people might get upset about it, like, he's the voice of logic here. Kirk is the one that's like, my friend's back, whatever my friend wants to do. I'm in love with my friend, I'm so happy with my friend. And McCoy's like, dude, do we know he's stable enough to do the things that you're wanting him to do just because your judgment is being overridden by your feelings for him? So I like that he's a dissenting voice throughout the whole movie. It's an essential thing to have him there to balance Kirk out or call Kirk out or question him and the decisions he's making. And I know he's done that in numerous episodes and stuff, but I think it's really essential here. And Scott pointing it out, I think, is a feeling I felt watching the movie, but didn't quite articulate in my head. But when Scott said it, yeah, I mean, it's clear he's really a big part of the film because of the role he serves here.
Yeah. He's the voice of reason for not just Kirk, but also for Spock.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And speaking of Spock, we look up and see him standing on a very familiar looking outcropping of rock.
Has there ever been a location that was used hundreds of times in film and TV before, but it's just so instantly identifiable with one TV show and because of one particular episode? Indeed. We are at Vasquez Rocks, and there is Spock standing on top of the most identifiable jagged rock formation that Kirk ran up to many, many times when he was trying to defeat the Gorn in the first season's arena. And it made me smile seeing Vasquez Rocks in a Star Trek movie. It sure did.
Spock walks into this room that has these computer screens, and he sits down, and we hear these fast voices, which, being that I listen to my audiobooks at high speed, were perfectly intelligible to me, asking him questions about Vulcan philosophy, about science, about physics, chess games, and he's going through one after another, doing each one of them, and we hear the repetition of the word.
Correct. Identify object and its cultural significance.
While he's taking the test, you see he's got 3 screens going on at once. One where he's typing the answer, or 2 of them where he's typing the answers, and one where he's vocally responding with an answer. But one of the test questions, you see a Constitution class starship very, very briefly, And it's the only time until the end of the film that you see a starship that looks like the Enterprise.
My favorite question, because as you said, some of the answers he's giving orally and some of the answers he's typing. And one of the questions is, what were the principal historical events on the planet Earth in the year 1987? Well, that is when he types the answer to. And it gets correct. So we never get to hear. He actually knew what was going to happen the year after this movie came out, but we didn't get to hear it.
Good point. Yeah. Wow.
That's why I asked you if you got your information from a Vulcan computer about what happened.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now it makes sense. And then the final question is,
How do you feel?
How do you feel? How do you feel?
And repeats. He doesn't answer.
I do not understand the question.
What is it, Spock?
And that voice is Amanda, Spock's mother, played by Jane Wyatt, who we haven't seen since Journey to Babel from 1967. And, what's great is that after we see Sarek in Star Trek 3, now we see Sarek and now Amanda in Star Trek 4. It's too bad that Sarek and Amanda didn't have any scenes together in Star Trek 4. That would have been great to see the three of them together. But here's the other, there's one thing, I'm sure you guys experienced this a lot throughout your journey on the Cine-Files, when you go back and rewatch movies that you haven't seen in a really, really long time. And that time away gives you a fresh perspective on things. Yeah. And I think the time away from Star Trek 4 and the conversations that we've had on the Cine-Files and on Enterprise Incidents, when the computer asks, how do you feel? How do you feel? How do you feel? And Spock can't answer the question because he doesn't understand the question. It made me realize that one of the big takeaways from the Voyage Home is when Spock is able to answer the question to his father at the very end of the movie. It's earned. It's earned. One of the big purposes of Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, is Spock's journey, his arc, to be able to answer the question, how do you feel?
I 100% agree. And I know I said it before, but Kirk is the central character of Star Trek. He is the hero. He is the guy. I will still say that in many ways, Spock is the most important character of Star Trek. And the journey of Star Trek is the journey of Spock. Mm-hmm. And particularly, from all the way from, because this isn't just these last few movies. This is all the way back to The Naked Time. This is when I feel love for my mother. When I feel love for Kirk, I feel shame. He can't tell his mom how he feels about her. That's The Naked Time. That's what is it, Scott? The fourth episode?
Yeah, it was the seventh to be filmed.
Okay.
Yeah.
so I mean, that's like a big, these are going all the way through what happened in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, where he's trying to get rid of all of his emotion, and then he chooses not to do that, and then he dies, and now he comes back, and now this whole movie, so much of this movie, character-wise, the emotional journey is actually Spock's journey from the somewhat empty person he is at this scene to who he becomes by the end of the film.
Wow. Yeah, that's an arc. Taking it all the way back to The Naked Time there. That's an arc.
I do not understand the question, Mother.
Well, you're half human. The computer knows that.
The question is irrelevant.
It's a really interesting statement, which because, obviously the person I relate to the most in Star Trek is also Spock. And so the statement, the question of how you feel is irrelevant makes perfect sense to me,
But also watching the scene again, I'm so glad that we're doing this on the Cine-Files. We're doing The Voyage Home, having the excuse to rewatch the film with a fresh set of eyes and that perspective that I feel like I bring to every film that I watch. But Jane Wyatt and Leonard Nimoy are so good together in this scene.
Yeah.
They are great together in this scene. And I think back to Journey to Babel when Amanda goes to see Spock in his quarters, pleading with him to relinquish command, to give the blood transfusion to save his father. Right. But the back and forth between the two of them between 1967 when they filmed the episode 1986 when they filmed the scene. So it felt like no time had passed. That chemistry that was established in the original series is right there. And this isn't even like a regular player. She was in one episode.
And she basically what she's saying is like, look, you're being trained as a Vulcan, but you're part human and you're going to have feelings and they're going to show up.
As you wish, since you deem them of value, but I cannot wait here to find them.
Why? Where must you go?
I must go to Earth to offer testimony.
You do this for friendship.
I do it because I was there.
I love that line. I think that says so much about Scott, and it's Scott. I think that says so much about Spock, and so much about what's it like. He's saying I was a witness, that's why I have to go, not because of friendship.
Scott Spock. Scott Spock.
Scott Spock.
No, I think you make a great point, Steve, because that's how he sees it, right? And Amanda thinks she's going to get him. Amanda thinks like, okay, I'm going to lead him to this point. He's going to understand. But no, Spock is very clear who Spock is at this point in his still like development from being revived in essence. And so, she's trying to get him to see, well, these things are happening and you're doing these things also because of this. And now she's really going to drop the logic on him, which I think is fascinating, turning the Star Trek II logic around on him here.
Spock, does the good of the many outweigh the good of the one?
I would accept that as an axiom.
Well, then you stand here alive because of a mistake made by your flawed, feeling human friends. They have sacrificed their futures because they believed that the good of the one, you, was more important to them.
I know I've said this before, but this right here is the heart of, Scott, you were talking about the things you learned about Star Trek in the course of our journey through the show.
Yep.
This here, the good of the many is greater than the good of the one, or the good of the one outweighs the good of the many.
Mm-hmm.
That contradiction, the whole thing, the big epiphany that I've had in all of this is that we want to go, well, one of them is right and one of them is wrong.
Right.
And the answer is they're both right and they're both wrong. And it's within the contradictions that is the greatness of Star Trek. It's saying,
greatness.
Yeah. It's saying, no, this is complicated. We have to look at if we look at it this angle, it's this way. If we look at it that angle, it's that way. And a behavior that Kirk could do in one episode could be absolutely right. And the same behavior in different circumstances could be absolutely wrong. That is the whole complexity of Star Trek exists right in this contradiction to me.
That that it exists as the through line through the Genesis trilogy.
Yep.
When we hear the needs of the one, needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one in Star Trek II. And then at the end of Star Trek III, why would you do this? Because the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many. And then to have it come back, the dialogue come back, tying these films together, and just being such an important part of Star Trek is it's incredible, actually.
Yep. But Spock's reaction is,
humans make illogical decisions.
They do indeed.
Jane Wyatt comes in and kills it for the scene.
Oh, totally. And as I said earlier, watch Nimoy's face when he reacts to what she says. Like he's hurt. It's really great nonverbal acting that you can see that he's processing this stuff in interesting ways. Yeah.
Once again, we hear that probe sound, that space whale song, and we're back with a Starfleet vessel, and the probe is coming closer, and the music and the sound become super heavy and super powerful. It gives you a real kind of sense of the inevitability of this doom that's coming.
Well, the sound of the screeching sound is the probe is talking. We don't know what it's saying, but that whoop 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 whoop, that sound. You know who did that sound? Leonard Nimoy.
What?
So they asked him, "What do you want it to sound like?" And it was over a telephone call. Like, what do you want the probe to actually sound like when it's like, pulsing through space? So he made the sound over the phone, like, whoop, 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 whoop. He goes, good, come in tomorrow and record that. So he recorded it. And then of course they, altered it through, with their various technology and everything. But that sound of the whoop, 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 That's Leonard Nimoy.
So I actually had this exact experience when I was cutting the first promo for the first Great White Shark doc. We were trying to steal it to CBS. I was like, I need a scuba sound. And I didn't have one because I didn't have that sound effect. And so I went to the mic and I went, and then we went and made the thing, made the promo, sold the movie, went to make the movie, then go to the sound designer who had hundreds of scuba sounds. We went through all of them and we ended up sticking with the one that I made by making funny noises, because sometimes you make funny noises. And so the probe is getting closer, and of course, as we mentioned before, the ship's power is going out. There's this wave of energy coming through. We go to yellow alert. We put shields up, thrusters go down, and the emergency lights come up. Red light is everywhere, and the ship is kind of tilted, and we hear...
Starfleet Command, this is Saratoga. Can you hear me? Come in, please. Come in, please.
This is such a great scene because that authoritative presence that the captain of the Saratoga emanated in the first scene of the movie, now when she has exhausted all of her options, all of her possibilities, and she sends out the distress call, she sits in the captain's chair, and it's so much is happening at once because the moment of authority turns into one of desperation. You hear her start to get a little scared because her voice stammers a little bit, and the helmsman and the navigator are looking at her. And while everyone on the bridge is looking back at the captain, that pulsing sound is taking over, and the lighting is red because their power is dying. And also, I always appreciated this directorial choice, is that the camera is tilting, and that the helmsman looking back, sort of has this grunting sound. It's powerful. It's a powerful moment because of the way the camera tilts, and it's red, and it's definitely, you feel the danger.
We're back to Starfleet Command, and we know this probe is heading straight towards us, and we hear...
Klingons have lost 2 vessels. 2 starships and 3 smaller vessels have been neutralized.
Neutralized? How?
We don't know.
So something about the signal this thing is putting out is wiping out all the ships around it, or neutralizing them.
So also what's happening here is you have the Federation Council president, who we saw during the trial that John, Chuck, and Sarek were at. Mm-hmm. So that Federation Council president is Robert Ellenstein. He was in North by Northwest, but he mostly made his mark in television in shows like The Untouchables, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Wild Wild West, and Mission Impossible. And of course, there's Admiral Cartwright, played by the legendary actor Brock Peters, who was in To Kill a Mockingbird and would reprise his role as Admiral Cartwright. Very big shift in his character in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, which I think is I really liked his character in Star Trek IV.
Yeah.
But I understood why he did what he did in Star Trek VI. And I think dramatically, it's a powerful effect. And he, of course, was also on Star Trek Deep Space Nine playing Joseph Sisko, Benjamin Sisko's father.
Wow.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
Didn't know that. Okay.
We're back on Vulcan, and there is what I will say, my reaction was, that's a painting, but a very pretty one. I like that painting. And we're on the bridge of the Klingon bird of prey, and the goal here was just whatever the Enterprise was, let's do the opposite, where things were clean and simple. We'll do that. And here it's like we're going to make things messy and levels and all sorts of angles and all this stuff. And I love the bridge of the bird of prey.
But I love how everyone's at their station.
Yep.
Everyone's at their station, and it ate the Enterprise, but there's Sulu at the helm, and Chekhov at navigations, and Uhura is sitting by command, communications.
Weapon systems.
Operational, Admiral. Cloaking device now available on all flight modes.
I'm impressed. That's a lot of work for a short voyage.
We are in an enemy vessel, sir. I do not wish to be shot down on the way to our own funeral.
Good thinking.
I love that.
And then we see, hey, Lieutenant Saavik is here. And Kirk says goodbye to her.
Sir, I have not had the opportunity to tell you about your son. David died most bravely. He saved Spock. He saved us all.
This back and forth is great because first Kirk puts his hands on her shoulders as a because Kirk's not good with feelings unless it's Spock. He's not good with expressing his feelings. He's good with emotion. He's not good with feelings, right? And so that was his way of showing his appreciation and care for her and thanks for being there for David. And when she starts to tell about David, watch Shatner's face. He doesn't want to talk about it. He's still hurting from it. Oh yeah. And but he respects her and her need to say this to him, right? And so it's a really great nonverbal and verbal back and forth between the two of them. And Robin Curtis is great. So I love seeing her back as
she was only in Voyage Home for a little bit after taking over from Kirstie Alley after Star Trek II for Star Trek III. And I thought she was very good in Star Trek III. I don't know if she was as good as Kirstie Alley, but I thought that recasting a character, she did a very, very good, solid job. And it was great to see her reprise that for the Voyage Home, even though she's not in it very much. But why does she stay behind on Vulcan? Well, I mean, she could have gone with them. She probably should have. But in the earlier versions of the story for the Voyage Home, it was established that Saavik was pregnant with Spock's child after a scene that we didn't see in Star Trek III where they conceived a baby during Spock's Pon farr.
Yeah.
Now, Bennett and Meyer cut the part with Saavik remaining on Vulcan because she was pregnant. I don't know why they did. I think maybe they would have left it in because it would have given some more depth to that relationship. But I still think that there's a moment coming up that we'll get to where it's pretty much assumed that she is pregnant with Spock's child.
Permission to come aboard.
Permission granted.
Thank you, Admiral.
Jim. Spock. Jim. Don't you remember?
Kirk's desperation to get his friend back is really sweet.
And it's like I don't want to say a running joke, but it's a running thread throughout the film.
Yes.
Because, he's saying, Jim, remember, you used to call me Jim. And later on in the bus in San Francisco, and he's like, Jim, don't you remember? What's your question?
And Spock goes back to his station, and McCoy comes up and goes,
"Are you sure this is such a bright idea?"
What do you mean?
I mean him, back at his post like nothing happened. I don't know if you've got the whole picture or not, but he's not exactly working on all the thrusters.
I love this. You have the Kirk and Spock moment, which is very official. Kirk's trying to make it a little more personal and take the edge off. Spock's not having it, and he's not there yet, and takes his station on, and it's not even the Enterprise; it's a Klingon bird of prey. And here comes McCoy going "What are you doing? What do you do? It's not exactly operating on all thrusters here." But the way that McCoy is just this is a perfect example where you see that the three of these guys together are three sides of a perfect person. Yet you have Spock with the logic, and Kirk with the super ego, and McCoy, rounding out the balance. And he just comes in, and just the whole tone of the conversation shifts.
It'll come back to him.
Are you sure?
And Shatner's reaction is perfect because it's clear that he's not sure. I mean, I'm Team McCoy on this. I mean, the dude was just dead, had his soul ripped out, put back in, was retrained in 3 months, and now you're going to just trust him to help run your starship? There's some weird shit stuff going on.
Mr. Sulu, take us home.
And we see there's that nice wide shot as the bounty takes off of Vulcan, and as it flies off, we have this absolutely gorgeous shot as they watch the bounty fly away.
And there is Saavik watching the bounty fly off into the sunset, the Vulcan sunset. And who's she standing next to? She's standing next to Amanda, the grandmother of her unborn child.
Right. Good
Another
point.
hint that supports that Saavik is a replicant. No, I'm sorry. That Saavik is pregnant. I'm taking it back. Blade Runner, baby.
Blade Runner, baby.
If you got to listen to any episode of the Cine-Files, listen to our deep dive on Blade Runner. I digress. So
For
yes,
sure.
that is another hint that Saavik is indeed pregnant with Spock's child.
We're back at Earth, and there is Space Dock, a design that I've just always loved, and the probe is coming.
And it is massive. It's giant. When you see the Enterprise approaching Space Dock in Star Trek 3, the little Enterprise, and by the way, the visual effects for Star Treks 2, 3, and 4 are all done by ILM. And that's why those visual effects, the practical models, still hold up and look great. But I love the shot of the Enterprise approaching Space Dock in Star Trek 3. Space Dock is huge. And now here's the probe passing Space Dock, and Space Dock is a sticky little, spin top looking thing compared to this enormous giant probe. Again, the scale of it is really incredible.
And we see the same thing happen, and it is really scary, is watching the power slowly shut down in Space Dock, not just on the dock, but on all the ships that are inside it are slowly shutting down. And it's scary because I'm imagining, these people are slowly going to freeze to death or run out of air, or their life support's gone. This is a really scary thing. And here's the weird thought I had. So, you know how when we discuss motion picture, there's that theory that we brought up of that, the probe going way out into the distance, that it might have met up with the Borg. That's the theory of what advanced this probe before it came back. I think not the same thing, but I think there is an aesthetic connection between this probe and the feeling of the Borg. I think the silent thing, because again, it's this thing you can't communicate. Deep sound, heavy sound, the square angles and shape of this probe is very geometric, like the Borg, and it has that same sense of unstoppable inevitability. I think emotionally, this is where we're going to go a few years later with the Borg.
Wow, very, very interesting. Great point. And you know what? From a chronological standpoint and a canon standpoint, there's a lot to support that.
And then what we see is that it sends this beam down to the oceans, which essentially is vaporizing them like a razor blade. It's really interesting to look at.
I mentioned before that the studio and Hart Bennett, the producer of the film, wanted to have subtitles beneath the screeching sound that you hear the probe make. And the dialogue that you were going to see in the subtitles is, "Where are you?" But even that, it's better that we don't know. And then all this time, it's better that we just don't know what they're saying.
Man, it would have ruined it.
Yeah.
Honestly, if we saw subtitles,
yeah, it would have.
Part of the joy of the film is the mystery, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Back on the Bounty, we're an hour and 1.6 hours away from Earth, which I get Vulcan and Earth are really close. And then Uhura talks about they're trying to see what's going on in the world, and she's getting all these weird transmissions. She's trying to sort it out. And then I love McCoy coming over to sit next to Spock with that smile on his face, and he goes,
Hi. Busy? Uhura is busy. I am monitoring.
Watching D. Kelly watching Bones try to fake some friendliness or some casualness to have this conversation is so funny.
It's so great, this moment where McCoy is trying to connect with Spock. And Spock is just not having it.
Yeah.
And then McCoy gets irritated. What was the episode where Spock saved McCoy? It was Bread and Circuses. And McCoy leans down. Spock is trying to loosen the bars to get out, and save Kirk from the planet of the Romans. And he kneels down and says, "Hey, basically, thanks. You saved my life." And, Spock is basically like, "I'm busy." And he goes, "I'm trying to thank you, Spock. You pointed here, hobgoblin." That's exactly what's happening here.
Yeah.
You green-blooded. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, I just want to say, sure is nice to have your Katra back in your head, not mine. What I mean is, I may have carried your soul, but I sure couldn't fill your shoes.
Yeah.
Which is such a lame line. It's wonderfully lame.
Perhaps we could cover a little philosophical ground. Life, death, life, things of that nature?
I did not have time on Vulcan to review the philosophical disciplines.
Which clearly is not true, because some of the questions they were asking him were philosophical. I mean, Spock knows everything. I think like that's what they're telling us. So I don't think that's true. Because this is the other thing I think that's going on with McCoy. He wants to suss out where Spock is. Is he competent to be flying the ship? What's going on? But he's also trying to find out what happens after you die. Like he shared this really intense, intimate thing with Spock. And the conclusion was that Spock had died and then got his soul back. That's really interesting.
Come on, Spock, it's me, McCoy. You really have gone where no man's gone before. Can't you tell me what it felt like?
It would be impossible to discuss the subject without a common frame of reference.
McCoy wants to know, just like we all do, is what is that like?
Yeah.
And in a sense, McCoy is asking Spock about the undiscovered country.
Wow.
Because the undiscovered country is death. In Star Trek VI, Gorkon refers to it as the future.
Yeah.
But Shakespeare intended for the undiscovered country to be death. So before we get to the undiscovered country, we have McCoy asking figuratively about the undiscovered country.
Which, strangely enough, comes right after the final frontier.
Bingo.
Oh,
there you go.
That's right. Yeah.
It's very geographical. We voyage home, then we go to a final frontier, after which we discover an undiscovered country. Anyway.
You're joking.
A joke is a story with a humorous climax.
That, too, is a plant, because that's something, you know, how we deal with jokes and humor is something that's going to come up as we deal with this movie.
Yeah.
And I like the last line is great. He goes,
"Forgive me, Doctor. I'm receiving a number of distress calls."
I don't doubt it.
I don't doubt
it. We've all been there. Oh, you know what? I got to take this. Thanks, Bones. See you, man.
So I was thinking about where to bring this up, but I might as well bring it up here, which is that there is a very recognizable plot pattern to the setup of a whole bunch of Star Trek stories, you know, which is this big scary thing is heading towards Earth. It cannot be stopped, and we have to figure out how to stop it. And that goes, you know, obviously it's this and the motion picture. It's Nomad. It's the Doomsday Machine. It's the immunity syndrome. It's like a whole bunch of stuff. There's a big thing, and people like have a tendency when being critical of going, oh, Star Trek is just repeating itself. It's just copying itself. And I think if you look at this and the motion picture and Doomsday Machine, just to name three of them, they are completely different in tone and story.
Totally.
So the setup, yes, we're in a similar setup, but how we deal with the setup is totally different. Like Doomsday Machine's about revenge, you know, and it's about dealing with loss and all of that. And it's very heavy and very intense and a great adventure. Motion picture is intellectual. You know, it's a very different kind of about Kirk defining what he is as a captain and all that stuff. And this is a fun ensemble piece and a caper movie. You know what I mean? So like, the plot is the same, but the story and the tone is completely different.
The tone is so different. That's a really, really great point, especially using those three examples. But at the same time, that while the tone is so different, what really struck me this time watching The Voyage Home is just how easily identifiable the break in the Act 1, the break in Act 2. Like, it is classic screenwriting 101 stuff here. When you have Act 1 is done, and now we're taking off on Act 2. Act 2 comes to a close. Now we're in Act 3. 3 acts. That's typical for film, but not all film. Like Heat is 5 acts, but I'm digressing. But Heat is a great 5-act movie. But the way that this 3-act film, I mean, Star Trek it repeats itself, but in different ways that makes it refreshing. So it may be a criticism, but it's also, look, there are things that make Star Trek work really well. And I think those things worked great in Doomsday Machine, in the motion picture, and in The Voyage Home.
We're back at Starfleet headquarters, and things are going really bad on the planet Earth. Basically, it seems like they're just vaporizing the oceans, and so there's cloud cover everywhere. We've cut off the sun.
Mr. President, even with planetary reserves, we cannot survive without the sun.
I'm well aware of that.
And then I like the moment of like, hey, Ambassador Sarek, looks like you picked the wrong day to visit Earth, buddy.
Right.
You know,
You picked the wrong day to quit sniffing glue.
But we get one piece of information. He says,
seems to be no way we can answer this probe.
It is difficult to answer when one does not understand the question.
This is what would have been ruined if they had had subtitles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
As a president, sometimes though, man, you just want to go. Will you cut it out? I'm trying to tell you, the Earth's in trouble here. I don't have time for your axioms and platitudes.
Mr. President, perhaps you should transmit a planetary distress signal while we still have time.
Yeah, and also Sarek is an important part of this, right? Sarek in the beginning going up against the Klingon ambassador to maybe stop him steamrolling and controlling the narrative, because it's pretty clear the president is a bit feckless at times. And even there, when just before he delivers the message, it's Sarek who comes in and says, you should probably let people know shit's going down here and they shouldn't come to Earth.
Right.
And so it is Sarek who's kind of been this essential voice of reason there with everything that's going on. And then Spock will
send
take
out a
that.
message while you still have time. Yeah.
Exactly. And Spock will
Yeah.
take that role in 6 when he's the one that takes over the negotiations for the Klingon and the Federation to find some peaceful terms.
Great point.
Yeah.
You know, you just gave me a thought about Sarek that hadn't occurred to me, because when we discussed him in Journey to Babel, I was pretty anti-Sarek. I think he's pretty much being a real jerk a lot of the time. But what just occurred to me is like, he's always used to being the smartest person in the room. He's in this room and he has to kind of guide the president of the Federation to make the right choices. And if you're always used to being the smartest person in the room, it's tough to recognize when you're wrong and someone else is smarter.
Right.
And so like he doesn't recognize his son because he's not used to people being at his level, you know?
Well, that's a great point. And then I think it's also, and this is me doing headcanon, him being married to a woman from Earth allows him to understand how to temper his approach to get Earthlings to do what he thinks is best, right? So I think Sarek, before he meets Amanda, would have just steamrolled the president to try to get him to do something. But Amanda, as we've seen in their interactions sometimes, she's the one that kind of, and even in the different versions of Star Trek with Winona Ryder and other people, like we've seen those interactions where it's kind of like she makes him aware of how he needs a slightly softer touch to match his.
Well, it was the experience. It was the experience in Journey to Babel that really softened Sarek up,
right?
Because the Sarek was different before that, and he's different after that. He's the fact that he is more empathetic to the human condition is because of the very emotional sacrifice that happened in Journey to Babel.
You know what's interesting? I know, obviously, we're spending a lot of time on this, but the three of us haven't gotten together to talk Star Trek in a while, and I think that's important. Well, and I think one of the things that's interesting and why this is working so well over, as we said, decades since the introduction of this character, is they stayed true to the character. They stayed true to understanding who these people are and what their relationships are. They didn't necessarily stay true to set design things and costume design things and technological things. Those are things that nerds today argue a lot about, is like, oh, that's not the right, this isn't how this person looks, this isn't how, and it's like, no, you could get that stuff wrong. If you get the characters right, that's what's going to make it work. It's not all those little details. Those aren't as important. We're back on the Bounty, and now we've started to figure out what's going on, and we get a message from a distress signal from the president.
We cannot survive unless a way can be found to respond to the probe. Save your energy. Save yourselves. Avoid the planet Earth at all costs. Farewell.
So what happens at this moment? The message from the president kind of fades out. You hear this ominous music. And what happens so often, and one of the things I've always loved about the original series, especially when the directors of the original series fell into the right rhythm, you know, directors like Joseph Pevney and Mark Daniels, Ralph Sinetsky, and Vincent McEvedy, something happens and the characters look at each other. Kirk turns to Spock and then Spock turns back to Kirk, and we see McCoy and Uhura look at each other. Their reactions, it's such a great moment that something happens, and then we see we see nonverbal reactions from each member of the Enterprise crew. And that's exactly what happens here. When Kirk turns around, when the view screen goes blank, and he turns around and he's looking down and he just looks up at Spock and he doesn't know what to say, and neither does Spock. They just got, big wake-up call that something really bad is going down on Earth.
What I love about the moment, and I'm totally reading this into it, but there seems to be an expression on Kirk's face of just like, again?
Yeah.
You know?
I lost my best friend in 2 movies ago. I just lost my son, and I lost my ship. And now you're telling me I lose my whole planet?
Come on. Well, there's got to be, I'm sure you guys have had this.
Am I right? I'm just like, what the hell,
Where there's certain things, and maybe because I'm a dad, but like, I'm sure you've had it in your own ways too, where it's like, do I have to come in and solve this problem again? Like, can't somebody else? Isn't there somebody else on call?
That's a great point. What, again? Yeah, I hear what you're saying now. Yeah, it's more of that approach. But I love Uhura's acting here too. She's the first person they pan to. They cut to her reaction, and she is really like consuming the information that the planet Earth could be headed to ruin and destruction. And you see her play it, and they keep the camera on her. I love that they left that as the first reaction because Uhura plays it seriously, very seriously. And so you as the audience are like, oh shit, And, so
she's gonna play a big part in helping Kirk and Spock figure out exactly what this probe wants and helping them figure out what they're going to have to do to get it.
This next moment, again, because we haven't talked Star Trek in a while, I want to drill down on a little because I think it's really interesting and says things important about why Star Trek is valuable to me and why it's important to think about it in our world today.
An unknown form of energy of great power and intelligence, evidently unaware that its transmissions are destructive. I find it illogical that its intentions should be hostile.
So I want to ask you a question. This probe has come in. It's killed the power on multiple ships. It's knocked out space dock. It's doing crazy, crazy things to the weather. Earth power has gone out across the planet. Have people died because of this probe?
Oh, well, I would say already, yes, people have died. Because especially if some of these other starships, whether they're Klingon ships or Federation, if they're losing power and if the Saratoga was able to get reserves kicked into place to support, they talked about some kind of solar thing to keep power going for their life support. But what if the other starships weren't able to do that? And that if all the power's down, there goes life support, then there goes the crew.
Well, and mess with
it's very possible that
and doing what it's doing to the oceans and the lack of power on the planet. I mean, there are billions of who knows how many billions of people there are at this time on the planet. A lot of people died, and the Earth is doomed. It's going to be destroyed. And Spock takes the time to say, "I don't think this thing is hostile." And this is the assumption that they are working hard in the world of Star Trek. It's what you said at the beginning. Communication is to try to figure out what they're doing rather than seeing an enemy. And in our world today, particularly the way social media works, we are looking for the enemy. We are trying, before we know fucking anything about anything, and we've seen it literally in the news yesterday, people are coming up with a narrative that says why this was evil intent and someone is specifically doing it to destroy this other thing. And this idea of, are their intentions hostile, is not something we're thinking about at all today.
Well, even when the realization hits them all that this probe's going to destroy the Earth, Kirk says, we must destroy the probe before it destroys Earth. And Spock's like, hang on a second. So even with the possibility that a lot of people could have already died from this thing, and Spock is saying, and I don't think this, you're right, that's a really, really great point. And this is very true to Spock's character, the same character who wanted to not kill the Horta because it was the last of its kind before Kirk said, no, we're killing it, until they were able to communicate and realize he went, no, actually, you're right, Spock, we shouldn't kill it. But communication, that always comes back to communication in Star Trek.
I mean, Spock was reluctant to kill the Horta even before he knew that it was the last of its kind.
That's correct.
I think that's, in a way, like one of the lessons of Star Trek is when you understand the other perspective, they don't seem evil anymore. That is a classic Star Trek story. But another one is, don't start with killing. Maybe start with something else. Try to do other stuff before you get to killing.
Yeah, I mean it's a difficult thing to process sometimes as human beings. And of course, we can only see it from our perspective because if you look at this probe within the reality of this world that's in Star Trek 4, this thing that we have known nothing of, no knowledge of, is, and I think it is causing deaths.
Yeah,
Like
I
ships,
think so
ships
too.
are possibly crashing into planets and causing entire like massive damage or deaths, possibly. And so, since you don't know what it is and it's killing people, then your first instinct is to destroy it because it is killing people, and it's
Right.
unknown.
That's right.
But yes, it does take people with more empathy, more intelligence, to take a beat and be like, well, what is happening? What is actually happening? What does it really want? What's it trying to do? Why is it doing the things it's doing? It's not always easy to have that kind of clarity in the moment because when lives are at stake, it's difficult to see through all that to try to understand it. But Spock is, as you guys have said, and Steve, you said very well, like he's always had that ability to see through. And I love the way Star Trek is written because the instinct is always there to destroy it, and even from its main protagonist in Kirk. But there's also always that voice of Spock that's more like, well, no, we need to understand it. We need to see what's going on here. It's not just emotion first. And so it's great to see it here as well, once again.
Well, and I think too, it's important to state if this thing is killing people, it is going to destroy the Earth. And if instead of coming up with the time travel thing, Scotty said, hey, I have a way to inject it with, antimatter, whatever, and we come up with a way to blow it up, I am 100% for blowing this thing up and killing it. Even though doesn't have hostile intent, even though it doesn't know what it's doing, but it's about to destroy the whole planet. Like we have to stop it. And so it's like taking the moment to understanding the motivations. We still might have to do what we have to do.
Right.
But it's just taking the moment is important.
Yes.
Really? You think this is its way of saying hi there to the people of the Earth?
There are other forms of intelligence on Earth, Doctor. Only human arrogance would assume the message must be meant for man.
What a moment just to be like, you know what? He's absolutely right.
And that's when he put the connection through that whatever it's doing has to do with the oceans. And then Kirk says,
Uhura, can you modify the probe signals, accounting for density and temperature and salinity factors?
To which I wrote down, Scott, Kirk is a nerd.
Is a nerd.
Yeah.
There are two moments where I thought back to one of our very first conversations on Enterprise incidents during Where No Man Has Gone Before. What did we say back then? And we said it many times over these episodes is Kirk is a stack of books with legs, and he is a nerd. And that's how he knew this, and that's how he knew some other things that we hear about later in the movie.
And we Uhura starts messing with her sound panels, and I would say classic. Anyone who's messed with like a professional sound mixing board, this is exactly what it sounds like when you start messing around with sound and speeds and things like that. And it starts to become more and more whale song like.
I think I have it, sir.
I love the moment when Uhura says to Kirk, I think I found it. And then you hear the whale song. And the movie just kind of like holds for a beat. So you hear it. And they're processing it, taking it in.
Fascinating. If my suspicion is correct, there can be no response to this message.
And he heads off.
Won't you stay here?
No way. Somebody's got to keep an eye on him.
And as we run through all of these different images of sea creatures, slowly but surely coming closer to the humpback whale.
As suspected, the probe's transmissions are the songs sung by whales.
Whales?
Specifically, humpback whales.
And you know what? It's good to have a McCoy who's always going to have the "that's crazy" reaction, so we can get some more exposition out.
We've talked doing Enterprise incidents, Steve, about those rare moments on the bridge when everyone brings something to the table, like when they all put their heads together. We're used to seeing Kirk and Spock figure it out, or Kirk, Spock, and McCoy figure it out. But when you're talking about an episode like Doomsday Machine or something where you got Scotty, with Kirk in the Constellation, and you got Sulu, with Spock on the Enterprise, but when you have like Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and then Uhura's putting all of her communication skills, like this is why she's the best of the best. This is the great thing about this crew is like they all have such specific talents that you put them all together and they can do anything.
So true.
Well, and I love this one has the particular advantage of the stuff that they're talking about in terms of it's actual science in our world.
Yeah.
We're actually learning about whales, which we hear, that whales have been here earlier than man, that they've been, and then this line comes in, and this is the key line in the movie is he says,
And humpbacks were heavily hunted by man. They've been extinct since the 21st century.
Which is very similar to like Richard Donner in Lethal Weapon, right? When he puts in the thing about the tuna in the second Lethal Weapon too, right? So this idea that messaging started in the 21st century for movies is just nonsense. There's always been messaging in these movies and making people aware of things that are happening in our world. And Star Trek has always done that, right? So this film honors it, I think, more blatantly than any film from the original trilogy. Sorry, the original crew. This is the film that really goes like, look, this is what Star Trek has always been about, and we're really leaning into it in this movie. And at that time in the 80s, not a lot of people knew about what was going on with whales. So that was another way of getting people more educated about this stuff.
The other thing, Johnny, is this, that in the original series, Star Trek was really right on point when it came to making predictions. Like in Tomorrow Is Yesterday, when they're intercepting the radio transmission about the astronauts going to the moon. And, that episode, aired in 1967. But, like at that time when the episode aired, we just had the Apollo on fire. So who the hell knew if we were going to get to the moon by the end of the decade? But Star Trek in the end predicted it did. But then at the same time, in the first season with Space Seed, talking about the eugenics wars of the 1990s. All right, that was a little off. But smartly, when it came to the Voyage Home, instead of saying how humpback whales went extinct in the 20th century, they went, maybe we should kind of put this in the next century because hopefully it'll never happen. But if it does, it would be in the 21st century, not the 20th century.
I'm so glad you brought up the Tomorrow's Yesterday thing because I hadn't connected it to that. And what I like about it is it's sort of like in the 60s, Star Trek was saying to the world, hey, keep working on this space program. It's awesome. It's an encouraging moment to predict that future. And this is the opposite. This is environmentalists have been saying for a long time, we've got species going extinct. If we don't take care of this, they're going to go totally extinct. And now Star Trek is saying, guess what? They did.
Yeah.
You blew it. All of these whales are dead because of what you're doing in the 20th century. Right. That's what this moment is.
And now you're going to pay for it in the 23rd century because no one can respond.
Well, and that's what they're talking about now. Because first they go like, well, can we fake a message? And like, no, we can't do that. Are there any humpbacks on Earth? No, they're not. Are there any other humpbacks anywhere nearby that we can somehow get? No, they're not. And so Kirk says, he makes the decisive choice. He says,
I have no choice. I must destroy the probe before it destroys Earth.
How often, Scott, has Kirk been rushing to violence in the history of Star Trek?
Great question, Steve Morris. And the answer is pretty often. Like look at his rush to violence in Balance of Terror. I mean, as justified as that was before he has a moment of compassion at the end. Look at specifically the rush to violence in Arena before again showing compassion. But more specifically, a couple of the episodes I brought up earlier in this podcast episode, fellas, is when you're looking at The Devil in the Dark. Oh, we got to kill this thing because it's killing the miners and we need the per diem. The mining of the per diem. Oh, wait a minute. It's a mother. No, I was wrong. And then, of course, Metamorphosis, that moment when he tries to kill the companion. And McCoy says to Captain Kirk, he says, you're a soldier so often you forget that you're also a diplomat. Why don't you try waving a carrot instead of a stick? So what does he do in this episode? And I totally thought about that, Steve, during my rewatch of The Voyage Home. There he goes. It's like, it's going to kill the Earth. We got to destroy it. But, then there's a momentary lapse of reason in which he changes course.
I think each of them allow the other one to be themselves, which I think is really important when you look at Star Trek, right? Because Kirk is allowed to react how he wants to react, emotionally, strongly, violence, sometimes not violence, sometimes, hey, let's slow down, let's talk about it, let's figure this out, using his wits. He's allowed to do this and be himself because Spock, in a way, and I don't think it's an understood, talked about thing. It just is. Spock is always there as these walls, these parameters, and Kirk allows him to be that for him in his life because he respects him so much. Like, am I going too far? I know I have Spock to pull me back if I go too far. Even if I get mad at him, he's going to be the calm voice in the room that gets me through this moment. And by the same token, Spock is in massive service for Kirk because Spock doesn't want to lead. He doesn't want to be the captain. It's not in his purview necessarily. So he gets to be the voice of reason and be of use in this situation. And of course, they genuinely respect each other and love each other, but they allow each other to be who they are. That's why I go back to that scene in Khan when he goes like, you think I have an ego and I don't have an ego. Just me telling you this is something that you need to do as your friend. I know you, And so we have these genuine moments with them because each of them allows the other one to be themselves with each other, which I think is the true gift of any relationship.
Yeah.
So first of all, I love the way you put that they allow, and you add McCoy in, it's the same thing.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. I love the way you put that. I think that nails it so perfectly. And this is the thing that I was thinking about is what is the big character story element of Star Trek 4?
Yeah.
The big question we are asking is Spock Spock? That is the big question.
Right.
And this is a moment where he absolutely is, because who is the person in Devil in the Dark in Arena? Who is the person who always pushes back when Kirk is going too far?
Yeah.
It's Spock. I mean, obviously McCoy does too in his own moments, but to me, it's like, oh, this is still Spock. This is one of the little clues that we're heading in the right direction. And after we decide that going to attack the probe is a stupid plan.
There must be an alternative.
There is one possibility, but of course I cannot guarantee success. We could attempt to find some humpback whales.
And if you watch Shatner, he immediately gets it.
Yes.
He understands what Spock is saying. McCoy doesn't.
You just said there aren't any, except on Earth of the past.
Yes, Doctor. That is exactly what I said.
The way that you already see the wheels in Kirk's head spinning, he walks past Spock and McCoy, and McCoy is already going, wait just a damn minute.
It's the best. It's the best.
Well, what's so great, it's such a love letter to Star Trek fans, because we saw the trailer. We know that they're going back in time. We understand what the movie is. We know what the movie is. But there's so much gift to us as fans in this moment. Yeah. And particularly as we go further and talk more about going back in time, because we have done it before,
Yeah. Yes.
That's right.
One thing I like, by the way, every time we cut to the probe, the angles are different. They show it in a different way. And man, they managed to make this silent big thing just terrifying.
It is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
And then we cut to back to Starfleet headquarters, and things are way more chaotic, way more huge red alerts. We're obviously in deep trouble. And there is a woman who says,
we need that power to keep the medical and emergency facilities functioning.
Who is that woman, Scott?
That woman would be Majel Barrett in her very, very last appearance on camera as Chapel. Of course, Majel would, really, she had a whole lot coming up for her as first of all, playing Troy's mother in Next Generation, and continuing as the voice of the Enterprise and the ship's computers all the way through to Star Trek 2009, when she was the voice of the Kelvin Enterprise computer. But this is the last time we saw her on camera as Chapel, though we would certainly see her a bunch of times on camera as Lwaxana Troy's mom.
We see that they're putting these big, suction cup braces on the glass. And that's one thing that we leave. Then we're back to the Bounty, where Kirk is talking to Scotty.
Scotty, how long is this bay?
About 60 feet, Admiral.
Can you enclose it to hold water?
I suppose I could. You're planning to take a swim?
Off the deep end, Mr. Scott.
Off the deep end, Mr. Scott. Just everybody know their roles, and of course, the screenplay was certainly written and rewritten by people who eventually brought it to the point where these are the characters that we know, and this is the characters that these people love playing. But this is just a great example of how Voyage Home was so true to being Star Trek, while just bringing in so much great levity that you could tell they were all just having so much fun.
You're really going to try time travel in this rust bucket?
We've done it before.
It's so funny because the next line is totally expositional, but I think it's like a gift
Yes.
to us Star Trek fans because it's what he says.
Sure, slingshot around the sun, pick up enough speed, you're in time warp. If you don't, you're fried.
You're right, Steve. It is definitely a gift to fans, even though it is clearly exposition for people who may not have seen, Tomorrow is Yesterday, where the slingshot effect was used by accident. And of course, Tomorrow's Yesterday was supposed to be part 2 of The Naked Time when they, went back in time, but I digress. And then, of course, the second time they used the slingshot effect was deliberately for the last episode of season 2, which is Assignment Earth, which was the, hopeful pilot start for Gary 7 that just never happened.
And McCoy is the voice of "This is a stupid plan."
You're proposing that we go backwards in time, find humpback whales, then bring them forward in time, drop them off, and hope to hell they tell this probe what to go do with itself.
That's the general idea.
Well, that's crazy.
You got a better idea? Now's the time.
And I think this idea is crazy. This is a perfect example of the expression "hang a lantern on it," where you have something that is weird and you worry that the audience is going to reject. So you have a character in your movie say how totally ridiculous this thing is.
Yeah.
And then we all accept it.
Because you could argue that McCoy has seen Kirk do even more fantastical stuff than this and get them out of even more insane situations. So why does he still doubt him? Why doesn't he go along? Oh, it's because you need him to be the voice of some of the skeptical members of the audience who are maybe not on board with this kind of stuff. And maybe some of the Star Trek casuals who come in and just watch the movies or just watch some of the episodes. The hardcore fans would be like, well, McCoy might never do that. But the casuals, you need somebody to stand in for them. And McCoy, as you said, Steve, so well, does that in a lot of these moments in the movies and in the TV show.
So Spock is doing his calculations for time travel. And now we go back to Starfleet Command, and it is crazy there. Yeah. And I love the details, like the rags next to the screens because it's leaking. Yeah. Like the idea that water is dripping into a Star Trek sci-fi location. It was really weird, but really effective in showing that things are bad,
Yeah. Do they sell those things that they put against the windows, those little stands that you I would love to get one of those.
There are times where I felt like I could use those. And then we get a message, a garbled message from Admiral Kirk, who's telling them what their plan is. And what's great, I think it's handled in terms of editorially, in terms of visually, really, really well, because we already know the plan. Yeah. So we don't have to hear everything that Kirk says. And it's way more dramatic to have it garbled and incomplete and watch the admirals and all the Starfleet folks desperate to hear this guy's plan.
We have intercepted at last. Recall the probe.
Satellite reserve power. Now.
But only the extinct species, humpback whale.
It's distorted at just the right moments because all you hear is humpback whales, only species can return the message. We are attempting time travel at this time as a time. And then that fades off and they're like, get it back, get it back. It's just amazing how much this film has so much suspense and humor. And, another thing that we've talked about many times, talking about original series, Steve, on Enterprise incidents, is how the stakes are constantly raised, making it even more of a race against time and then even more of a race against time. And that does happen a lot throughout this film, as we'll get into.
I don't know if you guys had this thought, but there's this thing in my brain at this moment where they're so desperate to hear what Admiral Kirk is going to say that I'm like, oh yeah, you were kind of mad at him. You wouldn't let him take the Enterprise to get Spock. He's in all sorts of trouble about the Genesis device. But now when things are looking bad, you come running back to Kirk.
Yeah, right.
Just save us. Save us, Admiral Kirk.
What's that in Jerry Maguire when he's like, oh, you're loving me now, aren't you, Jerry? You're loving me now?
Yeah. Well, and I think at that moment, as Earth is in deep, deep trouble, and what was the crew of the Enterprise is heading off towards the sun to attempt time travel, is a good time to end part one of our exploration of Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. Of course, we'd love to hear your thoughts. You can visit us on our Facebook page. Just do a search for the Cine-Files. It's Cine_Files on X, the Cine-Files podcast on Instagram. And if you want to buy or stream Star Trek IV along with every other film we've ever reviewed, that's at cinephiles.net. You can support the show at patreon.com/the Cine-Files or Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe to the show at all the usual places. And if you haven't left a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, please do so. They're very, very helpful. If you want to reach me, it's SR Morris on Twitter, SR Morris1 on Instagram. Mr. Mance, if people would like to reach you, how would they go about doing it?
Well, the best way to do that is on Instagram, on X, Twitter, whatever. I don't know what the hell to call it these days, and even TikTok, at Movie Mance. But I just want to say for everyone listening who has, really, really joined us for the entire voyage of the original and animated series on Enterprise Incidents, thank you so much for that. It's great to have you back here with us on the Cine-Files, hearing about Star Trek 4. And if you have never listened to our Enterprise Incidents with Scott and Steve, where John Rocha has guested many, many times, please head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts and go from the very beginning on our incredible deep dive conversations on every episode of the original series and the animated series. And I cannot wait to literally dive into the Voyage Home Part 2 here on the Cine-Files with my great friends, Steve Morris and Johnny Rocha.
Absolutely. And speaking of John Rocha, how would people find you if they wanted to enter the world, the Rocha-verse, if you will?
Oh, my.
The Rocha-verse. I love that.
You can head over to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/John Rocha says. By the time this goes, I guess this won't go. So next week, it'll be under a new name, but it is the Outlaw Nation for now. You can head on over there and subscribe to the stuff we got going on. But you can also follow me at The Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, and Threads, everywhere social media exists. Thank you. And a lot of fun. Glad we've done this, and I'm really excited and looking forward to part 2 as well.
So much fun. Scott, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks,
of course,
Scott.
we couldn't voyage home without you. I believe it would be illegal.
Well, what conversation on Star Trek would be complete without me saying to you and to everyone, keep going boldly.
Yes.
And I think that's it for this week. We'll be back next time for the continuation of Star Trek 4 on the Cine-Files.